Welcome to Awakening into Life, where we host an ongoing series of conversations regarding the nature of non-duality, self-realization, and the embodiment of awakening, all offered freely from the heart of Bradley. In this session, we'll be continuing in our Campaign of Consciousness series, specifically talking about being wary of our traps. Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is our 6th session in the Campaign of Consciousness series that we've been sharing together here now for the past few weeks. And tonight, our topic is on being wary of our traps. So first of all, can everybody hear me? Hello? All right, excellent, excellent. As usual, I like to start off by reminding folks that these sessions are recorded and they are broadcast on Facebook Live. So if you prefer to maintain your anonymity or you want to remain private in some way, you're more than welcome to turn off your camera or to leave your microphone on mute. If we find background noise and stuff like that happening, I'm very likely to put people's microphones on mute anyway. And so I also want to state that last week I had said that tonight's session might be a bit short, but then I started making some notes yesterday. And I think there might be plenty of material to fill the time. As I also like to remind folks, take what's meant for you and leave the rest behind. This is really about your journey, not mine. And this is an offering or an invitation. It's the role of a teacher is to invite you into yourself, right? To offer different perspectives than the ones that we may be used to, simply because our conditioning is so strong. There's such a significant gravitational force to the systems and structures of mind. And so the role of the teacher in many ways is just to offer some alternatives, some pointers, some ways of looking and seeing and experiencing that are meant to be played with, not to be taken literally or to be seen as an instruction per se, but just as a very simple, very humble invitation into yourself. So take what's meant for you and leave the rest behind. The other thing to keep in mind, tonight's session, throughout this series, I've said that it's very indirect, meant to be gentle. Yeah. Tonight, that may not be so much the case. So I want to offer that as sort of I want to offer that as a preparatory phrase or so to just explain that, tonight, when I start talking about traps, I'm going to be talking about things that you yourself may hold quite near and dear. So many of us have been on this spiritual journey for quite some time, and we have accumulated a tremendous amount of spiritual knowledge. And awakening, within the context that we've defined it as a part of this program, right? As a fundamental psychological shift in conscious perception. to have a spiritual awakening in such a way actually requires or demands of us that we see beyond those systems and structures of mind, what's been built out of language, out of our conditioning. Everything has to be challenged in order for us to let go of that sense of safety and security that we're holding on to, which is, by its very nature, false to begin with. But it's very difficult for many people to relinquish the known, to relinquish the known in favor of the unknown, or to take it even a step further, to relinquish the known in favor of the unknowable, to step into the mystery in a wholehearted way. Now, this is the second to last session in this series. Next week, we're going to talk about the dance of fear and surrender. So a lot of the things I might elucidate this evening may inspire a sense of fear as we go, wait a minute, you mean the thing I'm clinging to or holding on to or most desperately attending to, the thing I've spent my whole life devoted to. You're presenting it to me in a way that that pulls the rug out from under all of it. And I'm just going to say that yes, in the tradition of all non-dual teachers, of anyone who lives and abides in this understanding of this recognition, right? The one thing that we can say with absolute certainty is that nothing is certain. And here you are with a mind that has a sense of certainty about this or that, or is seeking a sense of certainty about this or that. And so uncertainty is the nature of the very lesson that we are all here to meet, whether we know it or not, whether we're willing to meet it or not. But for the most part, the people who find themselves attending these kinds of sessions, there's already a tremendous willingness. We've tried everything else. Again, we've accumulated lots and lots of spiritual knowledge, but it hasn't helped. It hasn't necessarily gotten us anywhere. So this process, when we start talking about the kind of shift that comes out of non-dual understanding, we're talking about an undoing. We're talking about an unlearning. We're talking about letting go of the need for answers in favor of simply being present with our questions in a really meaningful and radically honest way. So tonight, we might encounter some things. You might hear me say something that challenges a fundamental belief or pillar of your own sort of expression or your own experience of life. Right? It's not meant to be a direct attack. It's not meant to be interpreted in a way that's meant to cause you discomfort. It's simply an aspect or a part of or a function of this invitation. An alternative label for tonight's conversation, right? We say being wary of your traps. An alternative label or alternative title for it could be, how much truth do you want? How much truth do you really want? How much truth are you really ready for? There's a phrase in the Bible, right? You must lose the world in order to save your soul. These are not statements that should be taken lightly. All the great masters have said this. No matter what lineage or tradition or religious denomination, this is a central theme. In our process of accumulating so much spiritual knowledge, it's important to recognize the value of the old Zen teaching about the nature of the overflowing cup, right? If you come and your cup is already overflowing with spiritual knowledge, with the content of the cup, it's overflowing with content, then it's going to be impossible for you to appreciate the nature of the cup itself, right? Because we're so concerned about what's in it. We're so attached to the content rather than recognizing the context. So those, you can never cross the same river twice. Everything's new and fresh, beginner's mind, beginner's mind, beginner's mind. Everything that you know, leave it aside just for a few moments, just for this hour and a half that we have together. Just set it aside. Breathe into your heart, breathe into your own heart, breathe in to the immediacy and the intimacy of your own direct experience. And listen with the ear of your heart. Wisdom knows itself when it hears itself spoken. Recognize the way that the mind responds and reacts, but also bear witness to the nature of mind. Recognize that you, as the observer of mind, are not the mind and do not need to abide by its rules or dictates or expectations. That ultimately the discovery of ourselves as this awareness is ultimately what the truth that we are looking for. It's discovered through the looking itself. All right, so that's enough pretext. Let's talk a little bit about traps. Now, the introduction to this session says everything's a trap, nothing is a trap, both are true, and both are traps. As with all good teachings, it gives you something and then takes it away at the very same time. So a trap is any place that we might get stuck on our journey. Any place in which we might feel or experience a sense of stuckness within ourselves, within our experience, within our interactions with the world, wherever that stuckness may appear. Anytime we encounter a contraction, right? A withdrawing, a place within which we're no longer willing or able to make contact with life. These are traps. So everything's a trap. Everything's a trap largely because everything is predicated or founded upon the principles of mind. We're using language to have this conversation, and language is inherently limited to the way in which the words are received. Everything's a trap because we're working within a limited framework, a linguistic framing, using thoughts, using words, using concepts, using ideas, using views and notions and models and beliefs in order to engage. It's all a trap. We'll come back to that. To say that nothing is a trap, right? Nothing is a trap. Why is nothing a trap? Well, because everything presents us with an opportunity to learn, to grow, to deepen, to mature. Every experience in our lives molds us and shapes us in the direction of the service that we are meant to render as a function of the whole. We'll get into non-separateness towards the end of this conversation. And understanding non-separateness as more true than anything I might actually be saying in the early stages of the discussion. But to understand for now that nothing is a trap because we're always being presented with new opportunities to see ourselves in a different light. It's by continually exposing ourselves through our willingness, through our sincerity, through our earnestness, exposing ourselves to this light that allows us to begin to witness ourselves in deeper and more mature ways. And through that mechanism enables us and ennobles us to be of greater service to the whole. To no longer be caught so much in the sense of a separate I, me, mine who must be defended and protected at all times. And give ourselves over. Instead, give ourselves over as an offering. Our identity, our separateness, to give it over, to give it up as an act of love, of deep love and infinite service. And I say both are true. Everything's a trap and nothing's a trap. Both are true. Many times throughout the series, I've talked about the importance of there being room for paradox. Because when we're no longer looking at life from the fixed positionality of mind, we're no longer limited by language, there's room for more than one thing to be true at a time, even if those things are distinctly opposite of one another. It's sort of like out of this not knowing, we could say this not knowing is emptiness, right? This not knowing, there's a quality of emptiness. Or in the Christian mystics, they would talk about this not knowing as darkness, right? Not as a darkness to be feared, right? Not as anything of that nature, but just a recognizing that, it's like, when you're in a room with no light and you cannot see anything, every step you take is a step that must be taken with absolute faith and absolute trust in God, right? That's the Christian mystic definition of darkness, to be able to walk in darkness with faith and trust in the light of God as your guiding source, right? To discover within yourself what that means. That's the invitation of the Christian mystics. So this not knowing is emptiness or darkness. It doesn't, it can't really be contextualized in any way. You can't give it any sort of dimensionality. Because if you did so, you're doing so from the position of language. And you're right back in the inherent limitations of language. So when you've seen the emptiness, when you've borne witness, right? And when you've really penetrated beyond the veil and seen beyond the limits of mind, the limits of language, then you're welcoming, you're able to hold paradox and ambiguity in equal measure without fear, right? Without confusion. Because it doesn't appear until language tries to give meaning to what it is that can't be known. So that's where the paradox emerges, right? There's this sense, perception, presence, beingness, awareness. I don't understand it because my mind doesn't have the power to understand. But the moment the mind tries to add its understanding, then we're sort of caught. We're caught in the net of duality. That's where paradox comes in. And if we're able to hold the paradox and the ambiguity within the space of ourselves, it can just be there. It doesn't have to be one way or the other. So both are true. Everything's a trap and nothing's a trap. They're both equally true. And finally, they're both traps. Because we're still using language to define this thing called a trap, to give it meaning, to give it context, to give it dimensionality, to give it quality. It's the discussion about the nature of traps and being wary of them, right? It's a pointer to something that has nothing to do with traps. It's wordless in its quality. It isn't something that we can express through the limitations of language. So everything is a trap. Nothing is a trap. Both are true and both are traps. There's a story I used to tell in some of the sessions that I would do at a Zen center a few years ago. I would say that imagine your life, your spiritual journey, the journey that you've been on thus far, as sort of you're on a hunt for puzzle pieces. Every person that you have run into over the course of your life has been there to hand you a piece of the puzzle. You go to teachers, you read books, you watch videos, you sit with friends, you talk with family, you investigate within yourself, all of it. It's all, you're just, in each and every instance, you're being given a piece of the puzzle. So our journey is a journey of collecting these various puzzle pieces. But at a certain point, we come upon that person who has the very last piece. And when we begin to assemble the puzzle and we put the last piece in place, we are absolutely astonished when the puzzle disappears. And we realize in that moment that the puzzle was an illusion. The pieces were an illusion. The journey was an illusion. And the one who was on the journey was an illusion. This I, me, mine that we take to be so solid, so concrete, if we investigate, we may discover just how flimsy and insubstantial it really is. At least the thought of I, and all of the thoughts that surround the thought of I, and prop up the thought of I, me, mine, as a separate entity, as a separate self. But that I only appears when we adhere to the systems and structures of language. Without the word I, what is I? We'll come back to that. So now I want to spend some time talking about some very specific sort of examples of traps. I'll offer some additional ones a little bit later on, but these are some of the things that that limit us, or rather I should say, these are some of the ways that we limit ourselves, that we limit our understanding, that we limit our capacity, that we limit our potentiality, that we limit the opportunity to discover the truth within ourselves. Again, I said, be conscientious that there are some things on this list that might challenge you. First and foremost is any form of positional thinking, any form of fixed positional thinking. Right? So there's a, I'm a graduate student in a clinical mental health counseling program, and I have a variety of interests in various theoretical models and ways of engaging people. One of the ones that stands out the most to me is acceptance and commitment therapy, because it is very much aligned with some of the things that we discover within the non-dual understanding, right? I'd say that there are some things that we would add to the ACT model to really bring it into the realm of non-dual understanding. But one of its fundamental principles is cognitive fusion versus diffusion, meaning that our fixed positional thinking, right, the reliance that we have on our conditioned thought structures, right, the way that we've been raised, the way that we've been programmed, we could say, the way that we've been conditioned by our culture, by our family, by our circumstances, by television and media, by the political movements that we're surrounded by all of it. We're deeply identified with all of it. We're taking it all very deeply personally. So we're fused. We're fused with the cognitive structure of what's present within the psychological makeup of this separate self that we take ourselves to be. And within ACT, it presents its opposite, right? Diffusion, cognitive diffusion, to diffuse the reliance that we have on those systems and structures so that we can begin to become more open-minded, less fixed in our positionality. Another reason why this is really important is to recognize that polarities create each other. Opposites create each other. For example, I was posting something earlier today on Facebook about, there's a movement within many, we could say, New Age and New Thought circles, and others as well, that there's an emphasis on a mind that adheres to prosperity, right? Rather than poverty. And what I was saying in that post is that one who puts prosperity above poverty is creating both. And it's only a mind convinced or fearful of poverty that is so deeply entrenched in its striving towards profit. Despite the fact that every great master from every lineage and tradition has said that you will not find what you seek in the world. That the true treasure is here. That the kingdom of God is here. That your Buddha nature is discovered here, right? So I just want to read a section here from the Tao Te Ching very briefly. One little part here. When people see some things as beautiful, other things become ugly. When people see some things as good, other things become bad. Being and non-being create each other. Difficult and easy support each other. Long and short define each other. High and low depend on each other. Before and after follow each other. It goes on and has some additional things to say. But this is an illustration, right? The fixed positional thinking usually carries with it polarization and opposites. It's either one way or another. It's black and white thinking with no room for anything that's happening in the gray. And yet, don't most of us live our lives in the gray? So little of life is black and white. And yet we cling to black and white thinking to encounter life. It's very interesting. Very interesting. And very unprofitable. So that's just one sort of initial example, right? Any form of fixed positional thinking. Another sort of following in the same theme would be a strict or singular emphasis on any one particular doctrine or school of thought. When you encounter someone who says, I am a Christian, or I am a Buddhist, or I am a Taoist, or I am a Muslim, and that person, you can encounter someone who has either walled themselves off to any other way of seeing, or you can meet people who are more open-minded and able to meet in neutral ground or meet on neutral ground and recognize and celebrate differences. I prefer to work with the latter, not the former. Right? So by strictly emphasizing a singular discipline or school of thought, we are greatly limiting our ability to recognize the beauty and the wisdom that's inherent. We're limiting our ability to recognize the thematic quality that runs through all of these traditions. We're failing to see how they're all pointing in the same direction. When we become fixated or attached to one way of seeing, we are limiting ourselves. It's obvious, right? It's very obvious that if I can only see from this direction, then it's impossible for me to see from any other direction. So rather than becoming singular, right, attached and clinging to an ideology, right, let's open ourselves up to the wisdom that exists and is inherent in every one of these traditions. For anyone who's interested in expanding their horizons, I strongly recommend the book, The Perennial Philosophy by Aldous Huxley. The man made a definitive study of the sacred themes that arise and are shared across all of these various ways of seeing. And it doesn't take away, right, what's most important to you. I've said before, you know, you can watch videos where you'll see you know, Christian priests, Catholic priests who have gone to a meditation retreat at a Buddhist mindfulness center, and they've come back and said that you know, studying with the Buddhists and learning mindfulness made them a better Christian. And this is a perfect example of how by learning from one another, we can actually deepen in our own tradition, in our own disciplines, the things that really do resonate most deeply with us. By opening ourselves to the fruit of the many, many trees in the field, we are fed, right, a wide variety and assortment of things, and we're healthier for it. Again, continuing on this theme, another trap, another way that we limit ourselves is by trying to find refuge or salvation in another. I said earlier, the true teacher points you inward toward yourself and nowhere else. Nowhere else. Now, there are a lot of people who misinterpret teachings that are thousands of years old, right? We might read the words of Jesus and we might interpret, oh, here is Jesus as a person speaking about himself as the way, the truth, and the life, or the light, or whatever it is that you take away from those scriptures. But he wasn't speaking as Jesus, a person. Just as I'm not speaking from Bradley, a person. He was speaking from the heart of Christ. We could say it that way. He was speaking from Buddha nature. He was speaking as one with the Tao, as the Tao. This is a discovery that each and every one of us has the potential to make within ourselves. And it is only made here. It is only made here. The discovery is not made in another. You can use and leverage and appreciate the teachings, the pointings, the things that are being offered by those who have discovered within themselves. You can have a fondness, right, and an appreciation for it. But never, ever mistake the teacher for the thing that the teacher is pointing at. Or you've missed it entirely. And no teacher worth their salt wants that. Any teacher that puts themselves at the center of your life is someone that you should turn and walk away from immediately and without a second thought. If they are not turning you inward towards yourself, then they have only their interests at heart, not yours. Continuing on. Another example of a trap would be any reliance on the systems and structures of the mind, including the notion of no mind. Again, when we get into fixed positional thinking and we arrive at that place where we're saying, oh, there's a mind. Well, the mind is limited and the mind doesn't get it right and the mind is untrue. The mind is an illusion. Well, then instead I'm going to opt for no mind. It's the same illusion. Mind and no mind create each other. We might use this language in a way to help play, right, or tease apart the dimensionality of mind, the way that we live here in thought and identify with thought. We may use a word called mind in order to sort of give some shape and dimensionality to that structure. But as the structure becomes diffused, there's nothing left. There's no border or boundary that's left where there's something called mind or there's an absence of something called mind. Because mind and no mind are themselves both contingent upon mind. Again, paradox and ambiguity. The reinforcing of these polarities, the reinforcing of these opposites, right? It's mental gymnastics. It's the play of mental gymnastics, and it's really a wonderful way to distract yourself from being with yourself when you're busy being in conflict with yourself over whether or not you're getting it right or not. That just perpetuates the whole cycle. So whether there's mind or no mind, it's largely irrelevant. Because everything is everything. Everything is interconnected. Everything is this that we are, the wholeness and the fullness of life, experiencing and expressing itself, everything. Nothing stands outside of the domain of consciousness. Consciousness is all there is. God is all there is. The Tao is all there is. Whatever word works for you, that's all there is. And it must be inclusive. The discovery within ourselves, it must therefore be inclusive. It's sort of one of the ways that I work with people and I present my own teachings is I explain that there are really sort of three stages. Yeah. At first, we're very much in the mind and we need teachings that help us see that we are not our mind. Or we're very identified with the body, so we need teachings that help us see that we're not the body. Somewhere in there, we may have an insight or a realization, or experience a seeing through or a dropping away. And as a result of that, we shift beyond the mind. Right? There's no doubt. I'm this aware presence. Oh, I can't even say that because that's arising in this aware presence. It's a mystery. I can't say anything about what I've discovered within myself. It's impossible. All I can do is be it. That's all I can do is be it. Be the discovery. It's all mental gymnastics when we're playing in the realm of the mind. Till we have this insight and we discover, right, beyond the mind. But then many people in non-dual circles, as you will find, I'm sure, if you frequent various non-dual forums, will then become attached to this absolute view, to the discovery of no mind. Yeah? No mind is the answer. No mind is the answer. Have no mind, and everything will be okay. There are no problems unless you imagine them. And yet, if we are honest with ourselves, if we are willing to be present with our experience, if we're no longer trying to protect or defend ourselves or distance ourselves from our own immediate experience, then there's room, there's an allowing. There's an allowing that's present, an allowing of mind, a recognition of non-separateness that honors the presence and the workings of the mind as the presence and the workings of consciousness. So within that discovery, we enter into this third stage where we have a much more embodied experience of life. We're not distancing ourselves. I'll come back to this a little bit more. It's interesting, isn't it, that when we have thoughts reinforcing thoughts, we're on a slippery slope. All right. Another one here, a very important one. A trap as being anything other than your own immediate, intimate, direct experience. One of the ways that I've described my teachings in the past is to say it's the inner science of self-realization. And I use that term, the inner science, because your own direct experience is the laboratory within which you work to make discoveries. So it is your own experience that must come first and foremost within absolutely every mode of seeking or every mode of instruction or every mode of insight. It has to be your experience. If you're relying on the experience of another, then you're invested in them for salvation. You're invested in them for peace. Again, this isn't about investing in some externalized, objectified entity. This is about the discovery of the kingdom of God within yourself, your own Buddha nature, all those words, all those labels, all those descriptions, whatever it is, the mystery ultimately, to discover it here inside yourself. So while that's true to rely only upon your own direct experience, it's also important to recognize that experience itself is temporary and ephemeral and ever-shifting and ever-changing. Now, one thing that I encounter with a lot of people that I work with is they may have some sort of opening or insight or some sort of mystical experience, and it's beautiful, awe-inspiring, right? Very humbling. And then they go through life and they want to get back to that feeling, that moment of inspiration or that moment of awe. They want to return to that, recapture it. And so they're busy fighting like hell to get back to yesterday. And if you're busy fighting like hell to get back to yesterday, who the hell's present for today? Right now, right here, in the immediacy of your own direct experience, the intimacy of your own direct experience. It's happening now, it's not happening yesterday. So to recognize as a trap this tendency to want to go back and revisit for the sake of nostalgia various insights and discoveries and experiences that we may have had within ourselves. But we cannot cling. We cannot be attached in such a way. Because the moment that we cling or attach ourselves to something from the past, we make ourselves unavailable to the now. The now is where life is lived. The now is where contact is made. We cannot repeat anything. As I said earlier, right? The old Zen quote, you can never cross the same river twice. Beginner's mind, beginner's mind, beginner's mind. Another example of a trap, all forms of absolutism. In one of the examples I just gave, right? You know, that second stage, right? The second stage of the awakening process, when we see beyond the mind. In some of the Hindu traditions, right? Advaita Vedanta will present something called the absolute view, right? And then the absolute view is in reference or versus the relative view. Yes. Now we're in position, now we're in fixed positional thinking. Now we're back in the play of opposites. Here's the absolute view versus the relative view. One is more true than the other. Interesting. In truth, everything that's arising and occurring within our own direct experience of ourselves is very much contextual. It's based upon who we are and who we take ourselves to be in any given moment. Said in an even more true way, it's representative, it's contextually relative to who and what life itself requires you to be in this moment, in order for the function or the fulfillment of your being within the grand harmony of motion that life is. Here you are, a singular note within the grand harmony being played, and the harmony at the same time. Both are true, both are true. If we're in some sort of absolutism, though, both can't be true anymore. It's either one or the other, and something has been lost when we fixate ourselves in such a way. Another one, and this is a really big one, is our tendency to avoid. This is sort of this is why so many people will go through this process and they'll have this insight, oh, I'm not my mind, I'm not my body, I'm awareness only, and they become fixated upon I am awareness only. And then they distance themselves from life. They distance themselves from the content of life. Okay? So they use the absolute view as a way to push away the thoughts, the feelings, and the emotions with which they are unable to connect, largely because there's still unresolved trauma, there are still issues, historical issues lost in the past, things that the person hasn't dealt with or contended with yet, ways in which they're hurting and trying to hide from being hurt again. It's so much easier, isn't it? If you're hurting, if you're really and truly hurting, incapable of healing because you can't trust in anything, you don't know how to love yourself, you don't know how to be compassionate with yourself, therefore you don't have the capacity to do real healing work within yourself, isn't it so much easier to say, oh, it's all awareness, I'll just be awareness. Ah. That's so much easier than saying, wow, this hurts. Wow, something here needs to be tended to. Wow, something here needs love. We use the words or the language of spiritual bypassing in order to help people understand that this tendency, while common, is largely unhealthy. In such an experience of ourselves, when we're distancing ourselves from our thoughts, our feelings, and our emotions, right? We're setting up borders and boundaries that don't need to exist. It's that separate sense of self that's actually working to erect those borders and boundaries in order to maintain the separate sense of self. It's a defense mechanism that's born of the mental structures that are unwilling or unable to dissolve themselves in favor of the unknown. It's all the ways that we're trying to provide safety and security for ourselves, which is of paramount importance to one who has suffered trauma. I must retract like a turtle into my shell in order to avoid harm. What do I need to do that? I must have barriers, borders, and boundaries. I must erect walls between myself and the world in order to ensure that no one can get through. That's spiritual bypassing. That's using spirituality as a way to distance ourselves from life. And if we are distant from life, we are absolutely unable to be intimate with life. And since you are life, doesn't intimacy with life seem more deeply true than distance? Another example. The various ways in which we allow social and cultural expectations to define us, especially the social and cultural expectations of a sick society. Now, I reference here a quote from Jiddu Krishnamurti. It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. Isn't it interesting that so many of us spend so much of our time trying to fit in? At the very same time, we also find ourselves spending quite a bit of time talking about all the things that are wrong with the world. So we're trying to fit into a world that we already acknowledge there's something wrong with it. And we wonder why it is we're discontented and disillusioned with our experience of life. So it's important to acknowledge the social and cultural expectations that exist, but to understand that you yourself, as you experience yourself, do not need to be bound or limited by them. Why? Because they're illusory. They only have the power over you that you give them. It doesn't matter whether it's the closest family member that you have who drives you nuts every day, or it's a complete stranger who just pushed all the wrong buttons. Most people are unwilling to encounter themselves in a deeply meaningful way. Most people are living in this conditioned frame of mind and believe it to be reality. They're so lost in their separateness that they don't have the capacity to recognize the wholeness and the oneness and the fullness of life. And they are the ones who are creating the systems and the structures of society. They're the ones defining it. So it's sort of like this wonderful balancing point of honoring, but also not being limited by or identified with. No. This doesn't mean that you say to yourself, wisdom arising from the heart is the only law that's needed in the world of men. And therefore, I'm going to break all the laws of men. Great. Have fun with that. Don't call me to bail you out. There's a balance that has to be played there. Another example, identification and attachment to the self structure, including the structure of body, the structure of mind, and the structure of world. Now, what I mean by this is mind, as we would define it here, is a term that we're using to point at the play of thoughts. This thought plus this thought plus this thought plus this thought in a continuous sort of hamster wheel of thought formation. And because we can observe each and every thought and the way that these thoughts play with one another, there is absolutely something that we are that is not thought. Something that we can discover within our own experience. In the same way that we become the space, or we rather recognize ourselves to be the space within which all thoughts arise, we also begin to recognize that we are the space within which the experience of the body arises. That the body itself is another manifestation of experience arising in this that we are. You are not the body. You are that which is aware of the presence of this thing called body. And many people I speak with will sit here and say, yes, but the brain creates consciousness. I'll say, well, can't we actually say, isn't it more true? Isn't it more true to acknowledge that this out of this mystery that is whole and seamless and indivisible, emerges language, and that this thing that we point to as a divisible quantity, this thing that we point to as brain, as a separate entity, that's just a word. That it's only a word that's attempting to divide the indivisible. And our dependence upon the word brain, right, creates the dependence upon the brain creates consciousness. But in the absence of dependence upon language, there's no such thing as brain to be found. There's only consciousness or awareness of the word brain, the object brain, the idea brain, the notion brain, the view of brain, right? So somewhere, right, there's got to be a shift, a transcendent shift out of the mechanics of language into the mystery of our experience. And in that transition, we are no longer limited to ourselves as this body. You want to talk about eternal life, you start to recognize that you're not the body, and you will understand why this language is used by so many living masters and those who have been dead for so long. When Ramana Maharshi was dying and they told him, when his disciples said, "Don't go, master," and he said, "Don't be silly. Where could I possibly go?" You'll begin to understand why that language is used. Our identification and attachment with the world, right? Well, if reality is seamless and whole and indivisible, and only language creates borders and boundaries, and the use of language to create such borders and boundaries is actually illusory, then what is the world? What are the things of the world? As it says in the Tao Te Ching, words give birth to the 10,000 things. Another example is trying to find fulfillment or completion outside of ourselves. It's in the same vein, right? We're looking for a relationship that will complete us, or a job that will complete us, or ownership of an object that will complete us. When I just have this thing, it will all be okay. Of course, our society supports this notion through its emphasis on marketing and the way it goes about it. You know, you have to be deficient in some way in order for them to give you the solution to resolve that deficiency. But you are not deficient in the slightest, and never have been. So identification with attachment to the self structure, including the mind, the body, and the world. It's all traps. Trying to find fulfillment or completion outside of yourself. It's all traps. Now, this also has to be held in balance with the understanding that there's nothing outside of you. You as consciousness. You as the indivisible whole. There's nothing outside of you. Can't possibly be true. Can't possibly be possible. Another example, another important example, is clinging to any tool, method, technique, or approach that has done its work and must be set aside or left behind. Now, I remember my original awakening experience came out of, I wasn't spiritual. I had no real spiritual lessons or teachings or anything like that to work with. I was going through a crisis, an existential crisis of consciousness within my experience of myself. And as a result of this existential crisis, I began asking, who am I? Who am I behind all the masks that I wear in order to get the love, the attention, the appreciation, all the nonsense, right? But who am I behind each layer? Who am I behind each mask? And so I was working with what we call self-inquiry. A year later, I discovered self-inquiry is an actual technique, and the very function of the technique, as we covered in our conversation about meditation in week 3, I think it was, we talked about self-inquiry as the question, who am I? asked again and again and again and investigated and explored. That's why it ended up work. That's why it worked for me. Even though I didn't approach it in a spiritual context, it still has the same power. To ask with great sincerity, who am I, is going to expose who we are. And so 2 or 3 years later, I encountered this wonderful Swami, very famous Swami, who just happened to be coming through the area. And I run an organization called Non-Dual Orlando. And these folks, they said, hey, we've got this wonderful Swami coming through. Would you like to post it? And I said, sure. And I went and I hung out with the Swami for his little satsang. And the next day I went back and I spoke with him. He was a lovely man, and we had some really wonderful jokes between ourselves. But I had said something about self-inquiry, and he said, oh, you need to give that up. I remember having several conversations with people who have come into my life since then, who I've had to tell the same thing to them. Look, man, self-inquiry is a great tool for you to discover who you are. But why keep asking yourself a question when you already know the answer? The same thing is true of various forms of meditation, mindfulness practice. These things are very valuable tools in the early stages. Or the use of a mantra, or the use of some other spiritual technique. These are very valuable in the beginning. But if the ultimate goal of these practices is to discover who you are, have always been, and are never not, do you really need to cling to these practices in order to be who you're never not? So somewhere at some point, we have to be willing to lay down the things that brought us to where we are so that we can make ourselves available to what's next, to what's coming forward to draw us more deeply into our own unique relationship with the great mystery of ourselves. A couple of other examples here. Believing our thoughts, trying to change our thoughts, trying to stop our thoughts. Now, I know that there are many teachers within this tradition and in other similar traditions who will say very clearly that it's very important for you to recognize that you are not your thoughts, and that as you do so, the mind will become silent. And when we hear a teaching, when we are a mind, and as a mind we hear that teaching, we begin to strive for not having thoughts. And yet, what we're really experiencing is a thought about not having thoughts. And if the irony is not apparent in such a tactic, it's important here to point out that irony. This is not about trying to replace one thought with another thought so you can have a better experience of thought. This is about recognizing yourself as that which is aware of all thoughts. Good thoughts, bad thoughts, right thoughts, wrong thoughts. Doesn't matter. It's all thought. It is not what you are. And this is an invitation to acknowledge that which you are, that which is aware. So you're not ever asked in these kinds of disciplines to believe or to alter or to change the systems and structures of thought, only to recognize the seeing of thought itself, to come into contact with the seeing as being. Taking this theme a step further, an emphasis on positivity. This is a wonderful trap, and many, many people fall prey to it every day. Because it's sort of become, we live in a self-help culture. where people think that by being positive all the time, everything will go your way. Now, what I love is, last week we talked about synchronicity. So this morning, as I was sort of thinking through some of the things that I wanted to talk about this evening, an article showed up in my Facebook feed from Elephant Journal that said, "Fuck positivity." And I'm sure if you go to Elephant Journal, you can probably find that article. I didn't read the article. I didn't need to. This, again, is not about creating a system of positive thoughts in order to feel better about yourself. When you discover who it is that you truly are, it does not matter whether you have a positive thought or a negative thought. The way that positive and negative thoughts create themselves within the polarities of opposition is a function of your conditioning, is a function of the way in which your mind has been shaped and formed, and by how it judges one thing as being better than another, one state of being as being better or worse than another. And so in that conditioning, right, we are now living in an age where that conditioning has taken the shape or the form of saying, be positive. Always be positive. Okay, so like you just suffered the death of a loved one, or a beloved pet, or you just lost your fortune, or you just got kicked out of your home. But stay positive. And if you don't, you're doing it wrong. The weight of that feels so ridiculous that it becomes obvious that it's not true. If we are intimate with life, then we are intimate with everything that life has to offer us, whether we like it or we don't. As it says in the opening line of the Sin Sin Ming, written by the third patriarch of Zen, the great way is not difficult for one who has no preferences. When you've given yourself over to life because you acknowledge and recognize that you yourself are life, then you don't need to be positive. You just have to be present. And even that's questionable, which I'll get to momentarily. Another one, again, similar vein here. The idea that it is our job to fix, change, or correct others. Now let's acknowledge for a moment that usually when we're looking at someone as being deficient, we're just projecting upon them those things that we have not contended with within ourselves. If we're honest with ourselves, we will recognize the truth of such things. It's not to say that everyone's innocent of the ways in which they behave, but ultimately, there has to be some sense of responsibility taken for our presence in the various situations that we find ourselves in and that we expose ourselves to. But what I mean here is the fixing, the changing, the correcting. There's a sense of righteousness or self-righteousness that we have within ourselves based on a series of beliefs that we may hold. And other people who have other beliefs, they're not doing it right. So our job is to get them to a place where they know how to do it right. Isn't it interesting? I know I keep asking questions this way, but isn't it interesting how we'll sit here and we'll talk about the omnipresence of God, the omnipotence of God, right? And yet somehow he's missing this one thing that this judgmental person has picked up on. And that person who's picked up on the thing that's wrong, they're in the best position to fix it because they know better. If this is us, I know better. I'm going to fix, change, or correct you, your behavior, your problems, your issues, your challenges. I'm the one who's going to make it all better by showing you how wrong you are. What arrogance, what hubris, right? If we're learning here how to walk in darkness, right? If we're learning here how to take each step with absolute faith, with absolute trust in the unfolding of consciousness, then that all of life is intelligent aliveness. If that's really what we're being invited into here, then what we're doing in our judgmental moments, in our self-righteousness, is we are judging the intelligence of life, and we are telling the intelligence of life that it's wrong. We're telling God that God is wrong. What arrogance, what hubris. Many great masters have highlighted the importance of being humble. That this is a sign that humility, true humility, is a sign of understanding. Not self-righteousness. That is arrogance. So if we find ourselves in such a place, it's probably worthwhile to take a look at that. But again, we also have to take some sense of responsibility for the various ways that we are engaging in the world. I will encounter people from time to time, often in the context of relationship, right? Where one person will say to me that the other person is at fault for the problems that they are experiencing. To which I am quick to point out, you're the one choosing to be with the person you're with. Understand and take responsibility for that as the beginning of all the problems you're experiencing. And now ask yourself, what is it you're willing to give in order to make this situation, this relationship work? Rather than blaming the other person for all the things that are wrong with what's happening, taking responsibility for your presence in the situation, and then asking what you can do, not placing blame on them. Take ownership, take responsibility. Even though there's no you to do so, it does not matter. Honor the sense of self that is emerging in your own direct experience, and allow the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions, and the sensations to come forward in a way that connects you with life. Honor what feels like it needs to be tended to. Don't sacrifice yourself at the altar of hope. Recognize the beauty of what's here, the opportunity that you have to celebrate life, to celebrate all of life. Take responsibility for your life as a celebration. Here's another one. Shoulding on others. I had an ex-girlfriend a long time ago who told me that on a regular basis. You should really stop shoulding on people. To which I would say, wait, what did you say? But it's true. Should and ought, right? Should and ought. This person should do this. This person ought to do this. It should be this way, or it ought to be that way. These are fine conversations to have, right? Just don't believe any of it's true. Things are as they are. That's what's true. If you want to make a change in the way things are, that's going to require effort on your part. Sitting around on your couch, shoulding and oughting about the way things are isn't going to change it. And again, this has got to be held in balance with the understanding. Fixing, changing, and correcting things, that's not necessarily what we're here to do, but also when you find yourself engaged or involved in fixing, changing, and correcting things from the position of the heart, you have been drawn into service, right? In a way that brings love and compassion and understanding to a dynamic of life that requires loving attention. That's very different. But we have to know who we are to bring that dimension of love into the experience or the interaction. So shoulding and oughting is not the way. Similarly, blaming others for our lives and circumstances, right? This person or that person made my life miserable. Okay, now what are you going to do? If this isn't the first question that you have in relation to anything that's going wrong in your life, okay, now what can I do? Ask gently. lovingly, with great compassion, with understanding, with patience, with practicality, right? What can I do? If that's not your first question, then probably some of the first things that are coming up are what's wrong, and the shoulds and the oughts are a part of the conversation. I'm getting to the end, I promise. Holding on too tightly or too seriously, that's a trap. This is a grand adventure. Every week I sit here and I speak with a great big smile and joyful laughter. And my girlfriend Lisa, who's sitting here, will tell you I'm the jolliest guy you know. Life does have its serious moments. And there are times in which we're going to find ourselves engaged in life in a serious manner. But if our general disposition is one where we're holding on tightly, or we're very tightly wound, or we're just taking everything so seriously or taking everything so personally, that really is something that's going to need our attention. Life is here to be celebrated. It really is. If your life is not a celebration, then the question is, now what can I do? All right. Another one, this is a very common one. Portraying or projecting a spiritual persona rather than being truly, fully, and freely yourself. Now, there are many people who, again, I've commented on people who present themselves, I am an enlightened being, right? Woe unto those who will not listen to these words of wisdom, lest they not discover for themselves the absolute truth of my immensity. What kind of nonsense is that? Again, if we are not absolutely intimate with our lives, there's no point in having any conversation about anything spiritual. And any person who's busy trying to portray an image of themselves as enlightened or elevated or transcendent or having something you don't, they are playing a game with themselves in their own mind. They have something else within themselves that they have not seen or looked at or worked on or recognized or acknowledged. If they're busy telling you about how great they are and how great they have it and how great they see it and how you really need to do what they tell you, all I can say is walk the other way. Every week I sit here and say, take what's meant for you, leave the rest behind. Bring into your own experience those things that work for you. Use this as an opportunity to discover for yourself what's true. If it doesn't fit, don't work it. If it doesn't work, don't use it. If it doesn't resonate, ignore it. This is your journey. Of course, the journey is an illusion, but that's what the journey's about, that discovery. All right. Coming to the very end here, other traps. Overcomplicating the radical simplicity of being. Let me repeat that one because it bears repeating. Overcomplicating the radical simplicity of being. You are. That's it. This is. That's it. And when we go into these places where, I've had people come to me and they say, I'm being haunted by this demonic presence that won't let go of me. How do I overcome this demonic presence? And I go, you have to stop believing in demonic presences. And they go, yes, but you don't understand. And I'm like, no, actually, you don't understand. You have given power to a belief. You have subjected yourself to that power. And it is only by challenging that belief that you will free yourself from its power. People want to talk to me about their various spiritual beliefs and traditions and viewpoints. They want to talk to me about chakras and energy centers and positive and negative energies and levels of vibration. Look, that's great if that's where you're at in your journey. To me, they're all just words. And I'm talking about a wordless reality. Those things, they have no meaning. They're no different from the demonic presence. They're just ways that we're using words to separate and divide, to give meaning and purpose, to take apart and put back together again, to find a sense of safety and comfort and control. That's all any of it is. And it's all a trap. So again, overcomplicating the radical simplicity of being. Just be. Just be. Just be. That's really it. This is what it is. Any belief in separateness that we have is a trap. The I, me mind that's trying to get somewhere, that's a trap. You are. This is. That's the end of the discovery. Any place other than here, any time other than now, and anything other than this is a trap. Plain and simple. Anything, anywhere other than here, anytime other than now, anything other than this is a trap. It's a mental structure, it's a dependency or a system of belief. It's something being concocted by the conditioned mind and projected upon the world as an abstraction that we then take solace in, or we find ourselves disillusioned by. Still the same stuff. All right, so that's sort of my laundry list. Now I want to talk about a couple of very key ones, just very briefly. The two most common things that I hear from people. I used to go to this group all the time, it was Eckhart Tolle's group. Yeah. I used to go to this group here just because I enjoy taking part in spiritual community, because I'm coming with an understanding and saying, hey, you know, when you listen to a teacher or read a book, right, or watch a video, you're still listening to that teacher, reading that book, or watching that video through the lens of your unconditioned perception, right? If you don't have the teacher there in the room with you to challenge the way that you're interpreting the message, then your interpretation is likely to be just as skewed as the mental systems and structures that you're dependent upon already. Yeah. So by having someone who lives in the understanding say, well, you know, okay, yes, now you believe it's this. There's this wonderful quote. I think it came from Ajahn Chah. I can't say for sure whether or not it's true, but he would have, one of his students was watching him one day, one of his disciples was watching him one day. People would come up to him and ask questions, and he would give one person one answer and another person another answer and another person another answer. And the disciple at the end of the day goes, Master, you know, I've listened to you all day long, and you've given completely opposite advice to people who have the exact same questions. How could you possibly do that? And Ajahn Chah, or whoever it was, said, when I see someone going off into the ditch on the left, I say, go right, go right. And when I see somebody going off into a ditch on the right, I say, go left, go left. So, you know, having someone who can just say go right or go left is really important if we're being sincere and earnest in our exploration or our search for truth. And to expose ourselves to such people is actually, it's a step in the direction of great courage. A willingness to say there's something here. Wisdom knows itself when it hears itself spoken. Ah, yes, I hear wisdom. I'm not sure what to do with it, but I hear it, and so I'm going to honor what is coming forward for me. There are no coincidences, no mistakes, no errors in life. If I'm here hearing this right now, chances are there's a reason. Whether it's a seed being planted or something is being watered or something's coming into bloom. I never know. All I do is show up and do my part. So I would go to these groups and I would listen to people sit here and say things like, I need to be more present. I need to be more present. And this is a fundamental misunderstanding of Eckhart's teaching, as it would be a fundamental misunderstanding of any such teacher's teaching. What we are talking about is the fact that you are presence, not that you need to be more present. You are the fundamental, illimitable, infinite presence of being. That's your true nature. It's been true since before time. And that's the discovery. Being present, making being present a goal in life. It's a virtuous goal. It can be helpful. It can help us to come more deeply into contact with that deeper sense of presence that is our true being. But again, as I said earlier, if we mistake the teaching for the end, if we, as they say in Buddhism, right, the finger, right? We're more interested in the finger pointing at the moon rather than the moon itself. That's an example of sitting here hearing a teaching about presence and saying, yes, 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 I need to be more present. No, you don't need to be more present. You are presence itself. You are consciousness. You are being. Whatever word works for you and resonates with you, that is the truth of who you are, have always been, and are never not. That's what we're coming into contact. The other one, very common, is I'm not there yet. Most people that I speak with will bring these words into our conversation. I'm not there yet. Now, I often will explain to people, okay, but you've heard every single master. You've listened to all these teachers and gurus saying exactly what I'm saying now. You are that. Whatever this mystery is, right? However we might attempt to contextualize it, it is what we are. There's no doubt, there's no question. I certainly don't doubt or question that this is the fundamental truth of our being. There's not an ounce of doubt in my voice as I'm speaking, I'm sure as you can tell, because it has been seen with absolute clarity. And so the invitation is for you to see for yourself with absolute clarity that you are never not there. You're never not present. You're never not this. The idea of I'm not there yet is bound up in distance and time. But distance and time are illusory metrics of mind. There's a wonderful video that you can search for on YouTube where Papaji does like a 5-minute, I think it's called something like the 5-minute enlightenment experience or something like that. And so this Indian spiritual teacher, Papaji, is sitting with a woman and she's talking about how she's not there yet. And he's like, okay, well, let's think about this for a moment. In order to get there, in order to get here, right? Here is where we're going, right? So in order to get here, do you take a bus? Do you take a train? Do you drive a car? How is it that you bridge the imaginary distance between where you think you are and what's really true? Like he uses different language, a lot better language than I'm using right now. But in the moment that this teaching is presented, the woman questions all of the illusions of distance and time that she's accommodated for so long, has a tremendous insight and bursts into 5 or 10 minutes of continuous laughter, which is not an uncommon experience. Tears and laughter generally tend to come when we discover this truth within ourselves. I mean, it's, you know, you can't help but laugh and cry at the same time, you know. So I just want to say, you know, these are the two most common things. There are others, but I'm sort of running out of time, and I do want to allow a little room here for comments and questions. But those are the two most common that I get. I need to be more present, and I'm not there yet. Well, these are beliefs. So what is it when we encounter those things in ourselves? I need to be more present, or I'm not there yet. What is it within the systems and structures of mind that's telling you that? And why are you believing? Where is the evidence for it? All right. So I've gone on at length for quite some time, and I have thrown down the gauntlet in many different areas. So I do want to create an opportunity here for those who are on Facebook, for those who are here on Zoom, to ask questions or to comment in any way, shape, or form that you feel comfortable doing so. So please, I invite open dialogue at this point. Oh, hang on, Elliot. Oh, there you are. Okay, I can hear you now.
There's a great quote from Oscar Wilde. It says, "Life is too important to be taken seriously."
Yes, indeed.
In some of my comedy, I said, I want to follow the teachings of Eckhart Tolle, and I'd love to be present all the time. I'd love to always be in the present moment, but I just don't have the time.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Yes. I do have a comment that I saw here that somebody had asked. So, is there anything else, Elliot? We've had some lovely conversations, and I appreciate your wisdom. So.
I'm good.
Thank you for sharing. It was beautiful. Yes. So the question here is the tendency to mentally rehearse expected conflicts with others, which ultimately causes unnecessary anxiety and self-deprecating thoughts. Yes. Yes, this is a very common thing, right, that we do. Let me just say very briefly that, you know, this is a function of our control mechanism, right? Because if we can pre-plan and rehearse, you know, every scenario in advance, then we're going to be in control of the situation. You know, if they say this, I'll say this, and if they say this, then I'll say this. Oh, and if they come back with this one, oh boy, I'm gonna whammy them with this one, right? So, you know, it really is. It's all shaped in the direction of trying to be in control of the situation, right? And so, you know, the best way to encounter these sort of control mechanics within our experience of ourselves is to just acknowledge that that's what's at play, right? To acknowledge, you know, I feel unsafe and insecure in the situation or the environment or the interaction that I may be exposing myself to. I'm not sure what to say. I'm not sure what to do. I'm not sure how it's going to go. And just sitting with that. Sitting in the uncertainty of it. And being willing to meet the uncertainty, to say, I'm not in control, rather than trying to be in control and figure out how I'm going to, you know, swing my left and swing my right and get that 1-2 punch in, to just be really present with, I'm not in charge. I'm not in control. I'm not the one who's making all this happen. I'm just going to show up and see what happens, right? Approach it more with a sense of curiosity. You can acknowledge, the mind may still do, especially if, you know, we have a strong tendency towards this and we're just beginning to start working with it, the mind is still probably going to do all the same stuff. But just to acknowledge it, to acknowledge exactly what the question says, right? Hey, because inside of every question is already the answer, right? So, hey, when I'm rehearsing these unexpected conflicts, or when I'm rehearsing these expected conflicts, it creates unnecessary anxiety and it fosters self-deprecating thoughts. Is that really useful to me? Does that really serve me? Does that really bring me greater peace? No. Why am I doing it? Well, because I'm unsure and I really want to get it right. And to sit with that, and to sit with, you know, everything that comes out of that, to just be present with all of it, the thoughts about wanting to be in control, the sense of fear about not being in control, the mind's efforts to try to create the mechanisms of control, to be present with all of it. And then when the moment does come where this interaction occurs, to be present with that, in this really open, curious way, to just see how it goes. It's almost like I said earlier, where I was talking about this as being the inner science of self-realization and using our own direct experience as a laboratory. Here you are anticipating everything that's going to happen within the dialogue. Be present with your anticipation and all the ways you're going to try to control it. go into the situation, experience it, and then compare your notes afterwards, right? Were you really right about everything that was going to happen? How many times have you proven yourself wrong? It's countless. So you already know that that the tendency itself is based upon a false premise. Yeah. And maybe it's unavoidable. Again, maybe the mind just has this gravitational quality to it in this area. But just being really honest with ourselves about, wow, it often works out better when I'm not trying to be in control. Usually when we're trying to be in control, we have a tendency to make things more difficult for ourselves. Again, signs of that would be the anxiety and the production of self-deprecating thoughts. Right? That's one sample. But it could also be, when we're interacting with the person that we're attempting to interact with, and they immediately, most people, it becomes fairly obvious when we're trying to manipulate each other in some way, shape, or form. So the person knowing that you're working with your rehearsed lines and they get a sense of it, right? Then they're on the defensive. And now here you are trying to control, and here they are trying to control. And now you're at war with each other, even if it's a subtle war, right? The promulgation of conflict, even if it's subtle, or passive-aggressive conflict. We create these circumstances when we try to control them. But if we step into each and every scenario or interaction with a sense of openness, again, even if the mind is doing all of its nonsense, all of its craziness, it's busy projecting and putting all these thoughts out there, just being really present with it and going, we'll see. Yeah, we'll see. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. I don't really know. Let's see. Comparing notes afterwards and just beginning to use your own experience as a way to begin to acknowledge just by looking at the data. How often am I right when I'm trying to do all this? And how often am I wrong? Oh, wow, I'm wrong 90% of the time. Maybe I should pay attention to that. So very good question, very beautiful question, because this is a strong tendency within most of us. Yeah. But there's also value in being willing to have conversations with yourself. There's a story, and I'll give, there's a difference, so I'll give a story here. There was a Buddhist master, and I don't remember his name, a friend of mine, Rudy, who's on the call tonight, who's a Buddhist monk. He gave me this book a couple of years ago, and I was reading through it. And they talk about this Buddhist master who gave the most beautiful sermons and teachings and Dharma talks. And he was well respected. His wisdom was just flowing wisdom, beautiful wisdom. And but every night his students would hear him out in the alleyway having these loud, impassioned arguments with himself. And one day, one of the students asked him about it, and he said, "It's none of your damn business." Right? And I know in my own experience of myself, so much of what I share in these sessions comes when I'm in the shower, and there's an emergent quality of wisdom that's pouring upward from the heart. It's the river flowing in reverse, right? The quality of wisdom emerges from the heart and is contextualized by the mind so that it can be shared through communication. Okay? And I may be very verbal with myself in such scenarios, but I'm not arguing with anybody. I may be having a conversation that begins to look at, well, if I were to present it in this manner, what are the objections of mind that are most likely to emerge in response? And how can I present a mind that's objecting with a way for it to comfort itself? That's not a conflict orientation. That's not a control orientation so much as it is a service orientation, right? If the ultimate intention here is to invite others into the full fluidity of the self with a capital S, what needs to happen for each individual in order for them to have that recognition and that realization. Whether they do or don't has nothing to do with me ultimately. So I know this first and foremost. And yet it is my job, it is part of my role, it's part of the function of life that's playing itself out through me to acknowledge the various ways in which mind will object to those things that are often being shared, because it's very common. So there's a dynamic present, right? Mind having conversation with mind, but it's a different dynamic. It has a different quality. So this isn't about this. I'm adding this, right? Because I want to make sure that it's not that we don't dismiss the value of being conversational with ourselves. It's a question of what's our intention here, what's behind it. You know, is there an effort to be in control? Is there an effort to get things to happen my way? Or is this an emergent quality of wisdom or presence or being that's coming forward in order to be expressed and shared in some way that is of service, So we can never throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. We always have to allow room for both to be true and recognize within ourselves the subtle difference. All right. What else? What other thoughts or questions or comments? I see one here. All right, hang on. When one has an awakening to the true consciousness of who one truly is, and wants to share to loved ones for their growth, but they reject it as a fallacy, what should we do? You should give up. All right. And I don't mean this in an arbitrary fashion. I'm not suggesting that, that your intention is clouded. What I am suggesting is this, and I'll be very clear on this point. When we look at another and we create division between ourselves and that other, and we turn the person into an object that either agrees or disagrees with us as a person, as an object, then we put ourselves in conflict. And in that kind of scenario, we're going into a mindset of trying to convince. Right? I'm trying to convince you of what's in your best interests. Right? Now imagine sitting here, right? Imagine that we're sitting here and we're having a very different kind of conversation, right? Right? Because I'm not sitting here telling you in any way, shape, or form what to do or how to do it or who to be. I'm not trying to fix, change, or correct anyone here. Why? Because you are all consciousness. You are all already that. It doesn't matter what role you're playing or how you appear. It doesn't matter what's happening or what's not happening. This is all there is. I need not fix, change, or correct anything or anyone at any time ever. And if I find myself encountering a person who has fixed positional beliefs and views, who's closed-minded and wants to live their life in a certain way, then it is my job to give them the freedom to do so, because they are in perfect harmony with the part that life has called them to play. And it is not my job to tell them that they're getting it wrong. There's a part of us, right? And it can emerge, right, from real compassion. My heart bleeds openly. It cries out loudly for every person who's immersed in the suffering of the world. And I wish with every fiber of my being that it was in my power to invite people into this understanding as if it were a pill that you could pop and be done with it. But that isn't the way this works. The way this works is each and every one of us must come to this understanding on our own terms, in our own time. And the people in our lives who are absolutely resistant to the wisdom and the compassion and the clarity, all of it, they don't have any room for it in themselves. They are here to teach you how to be patient and loving and understanding and compassionate in the face of their ignorance. Their ignorance is a lesson for you in how to let go, how to allow, how to trust in the intelligence, aliveness of life as it plays out every role. So our effort to try to enlighten others, so to speak, right, generally emerges from the fact that there's still something in our experience, right, that's grounded in separateness. Because only when I am here in my separate self and I see you out there as a separate self, and I, my separate self, have a better vehicle of understanding than you as your separate self, and now it's my job to enlighten you. No, you are enlightened. Every being is already enlightened. That word has no meaning whatsoever beyond the power that we give it, just like any other word. Notice that the most enlightened beings in history, they don't wander around with a big sign that says you're all getting it wrong. They usually are offering unconditional love and tenderness and patience and compassion. They're allowing people the freedom to be who they are. Now, of course, there are dynamics at play within this, right? You know, there are various scenarios and situations. I know there are often people who raise their hand and go, but what about this person? And what about this scenario? And it's like, look, man, if that's not happening right now, all you're doing is playing with words. This is about what's here now. And what's here now is this opportunity to recognize that life knows what it's doing, even when it appears that it doesn't. And that your job is to allow, to let go, to play your part, to acknowledge that there's something in you, right, that still sees something in the world that needs your attention. But it's not the thing in the world that needs your attention, it's the thing in you. I will also say that myself and my girlfriend Lisa, we have this exact scenario in our lives. We acknowledge the depth of which we would love to see the people in our own lives get it, right? Get it. I wish you would just get it. How beautiful would that be? But if you understand that they already have it and that they're never without it, then all you can do is be present with them in the way that they want to be present with you. Give them the room to be who they are. And you figure out for yourself what the boundaries are that you need to draw. You know, if you've got somebody in your life that you love wholeheartedly and you want the best for them, but they're a complete asshole, probably not a great idea to spend a lot of time hanging out together. There's nothing, it doesn't diminish your love. Love the person right here as yourself. Love that person right here in the tenderness of your own being, because they are none other than you. Love them here. Let them be who they are out there, and love them here. All right. Anything else? Any other thoughts? There's a great question, by the way, a really wonderful question. Thank you so much for asking. These are all lovely questions. They're all very, very tied to this question of traps, the places that we find ourselves, the difficulties that we encounter, the things that give shape and mold us into who life needs us to be. All right. Well, I've used up everyone's time here a little bit further beyond the 9:30 mark that I try to hit. So I want to honor that, and I don't want to take up any more. What I will say, though, is we will revisit some of these topics again next week in our last session in this series. We will be talking about the dance of fear and surrender. So tonight, what I was doing is really presenting all the different ways in which we entrap ourselves in attachments, in clinging, in identification. And so next week's talk is about, okay, well, what do I do if all that's absent? Like, you know, if everything that I've relied on my whole life, the systems and structures of mind, if it's all untrue, well, then what the hell am I supposed to do? You know, what's this about if it's not about any of that? So the dance of fear and surrender is about how to come to terms with not knowing, you know, how to embody the mystery, how to give yourself over to it in a loving way. So we'll revisit some of these topics next week in our session. And what I would invite you to do is bring some, I'll open it up at the very beginning, because this was a big topic tonight, right? With a lot of examples. I mean, hitting really hard at some of the most common things that many of us probably went, oh, I do that. Oh yeah, I do that too. Oh yeah, I got that on my list, right? So I'll start next week by opening up an opportunity to continue this conversation a little bit more before we dive into the dance of fear and surrender, because I'm sure that one will very likely support the other. And with that said, everyone, I just want to thank you again for taking the time to sit and to listen and to be present with this sharing, right? This to be present and open to this invitation to discover for yourself, right, who you truly are, and to really inhabit and embody that recognition, to allow it to live you. Yeah, because it's already doing so. It's already happening. All right. Thank you again, everyone. Thank you so much. Take care. Have a beautiful evening, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, man.
Bye-bye.